Arthur Conan Doyle, The Hound of the Baskervilles. Chapter 15. A Retrospection. It was the end of November, and Holmes and I were sitting on a cold, foggy night on each side of a bright fire in our sitting room in Baker Street. Since the tragic end of our visit to Devonshire, he had worked on two very important cases. In the first, he exposed the terrible behavior of Colonel Upwood in the famous card scandal at the Nonpareil Club. In the second, he defended the unfortunate Madame Montpensier against a charge of murder connected with the death of her stepdaughter, Mademoiselle Carrère, who, as people may remember, was found 6 months later alive and married in New York. My friend was in very good spirits because of his success in several difficult and important cases, so I was able to persuade him to discuss the details of the Baskerville mystery. I had waited patiently for this moment because I knew that he never allowed cases to overlap and that his clear and logical mind would not leave present work to think about the past. However, Sir Henry and Dr. Mortimer were in London, preparing for the long voyage that had been advised to restore Sir Henry's damaged nerves. They had visited us that very afternoon, so it was natural that the subject should be discussed. "The whole chain of events," said Holmes, "from the point of view of the man who called himself Stapleton, was simple and direct. But to us, who at first did not know his motives and could only discover part of the facts, it seemed very complicated. I have had 2 conversations with Mrs. Stapleton, and the case is now so completely explained that I do not think anything remains unknown to us. You will find some notes about it under the letter B in my indexed list of cases. Perhaps you would kindly give me a summary of the events from memory." "Certainly, though I cannot promise that I remember every detail. Strong mental concentration has a strange way of wiping out what has gone before. A lawyer who knows his case perfectly and can argue every point may find that, after a few weeks in court, it has completely left his mind. In the same way, each of my cases pushes the previous one aside, and Mademoiselle Carrère has blurred my memory of Baskerville Hall. Tomorrow another small problem may be brought to me, and it will replace both the French lady and the wicked Upwood. However, as far as the case of the Hound is concerned, I will explain the chain of events as clearly as I can, and you may remind me of anything I forget. My investigations show beyond any doubt that the family portrait told the truth, and that this man was indeed a Baskerville. He was the son of Roger Baskerville, the younger brother of Sir Charles, who fled to South America with a bad reputation and was believed to have died unmarried. In fact, he did marry and had 1 child. This man, whose real name was the same as his father's. He married Burrell Garcia, one of the beauties of Costa Rica. After stealing a large amount of public money, he changed his name to Vandeleur and escaped to England, where he opened a school in the east of Yorkshire. He chose this profession because, on the journey home, he had met a tutor who was suffering from tuberculosis, and he used this man's skills to help make the school successful. However, the tutor, Fraser, died, and the school, which had begun well, slowly became notorious and disgraceful. The Vandeleurs then changed their name to Stapleton. He brought what remained of his money, his plans for the future, and his love of insects to the south of England. At the British Museum, I learned that he was a recognized expert in entomology, and that the name Vandeleur is permanently connected with a certain moth which he was the first to describe during his time in Yorkshire. Now we come to the part of his life that concerns us most. The man had clearly investigated his family history and discovered that only 2 people stood between him and a valuable estate. When he went to Devonshire, his plans were probably not fully formed, but it is clear that he intended harm from the beginning, as shown by the way he presented his wife as his sister. The idea of using her to attract others was already in his mind, though he may not yet have decided on the exact details of his plan. His final goal was to gain the estate, and he was willing to use any method or take any risk to achieve it. His first step was to settle as close as possible to his ancestral home. His second step was to become friendly with Sir Charles Baskerville and with the neighbors. The baronet himself told him about the family hound, and so he helped to prepare the way for his own death. Stapleton, as I will continue to call him, knew that the old man's heart was weak and that a sudden shock could kill him. He had learned this from Dr. Mortimer. He also knew that Sir Charles was superstitious and took the old legend very seriously. His clever mind quickly found a way to kill the baronet so that it would be almost impossible to prove who the real murderer was. After thinking of this plan, he carried it out with great skill. An ordinary criminal would have been satisfied with using a savage dog. But the idea of using chemicals to make the animal look like a demon was a stroke of genius. He bought the dog in London from Ross and Mangles, the dealers in Fulham Road. It was the strongest and most dangerous animal they had. He brought it down by train on the North Devon line and then walked a long distance over the moor to reach his home without attracting attention. During his insect hunts, he had already learned how to cross the Grimpen Mire and had found a safe hiding place there for the dog. He kept it there and waited for the right moment. But that moment did not come quickly. The old gentleman could not easily be persuaded to leave his grounds at night. Several times Stapleton waited outside with his hound, but without success. During these useless attempts, he, or rather the hound, was seen by country people, and so the story of the demon dog was strengthened. He had hoped that his wife would attract Sir Charles and lead him to his death, but she refused to do so. She would not try to make the old man fall in love with her and thus deliver him to his enemy. Threats, and even, I am sorry to say, violence, did not change her mind. She refused to take part, and for a time Stapleton's plan could not move forward. He solved his problem because Sir Charles, who trusted him, allowed him to manage his charity in the case of Mrs. Laura Lyons. By pretending to be unmarried, he gained complete control over her, and made her believe that if she divorced her husband, he would marry her. His plans suddenly became urgent when he learned that Sir Charles was going to leave the Hall on Dr. Mortimer's advice, a view that Stapleton himself pretended to support. He had to act at once, or his victim might escape him. So he persuaded Mrs. Lyons to write the letter, asking the old man to meet her on the evening before his planned departure for London. Then, using clever arguments, he stopped her from keeping the appointment, and so he created the opportunity he had been waiting for. While driving back in the evening from Coombe Tracy, he had enough time to get his hound, cover it with his terrible glowing paint, and bring the animal to the gate where he expected to find the old gentleman waiting. The dog, urged on by its master, jumped over the small gate and chased the unfortunate baronet, who ran screaming down the yew alley. In that dark passage it must have been a horrifying sight to see the huge black creature, with its flaming jaws and shining eyes, leaping after its victim. He fell dead at the end of the alley from heart failure and terror. The hound had run on the grassy edge while the baronet had stayed on the path, so that only the man's footprints could be seen. When the dog saw him lying still, it probably came closer to smell him, but finding him dead, it turned away. It was at that moment that it left the footprint which Dr. Mortimer later noticed. The hound was then called back and taken to its hiding place in the Grimpen Mire, and a mystery remained that confused the authorities, frightened the countryside, and finally brought the case to our attention. That explains the death of Sir Charles Baskerville. You can see the evil cleverness of it, because it would have been almost impossible to prove the guilt of the real murderer. His only partner was an animal that could never betray him, and the strange and unbelievable nature of the method only made it more effective. Both women involved in the case, Mrs. Stapleton and Mrs. Laura Lyons, had strong suspicions about Stapleton. Mrs. Stapleton knew that he had plans against the old man and also knew about the Hound. Mrs. Lyons did not know these things, but she was troubled by the fact that the death happened at the time of a meeting which only Stapleton knew about. However, both women were under his control, and he had no reason to fear them. The first half of his plan had succeeded, but the more difficult part was still ahead. It is possible that Stapleton did not know at first about the existence of an heir in Canada. In any case, he soon learned it from his friend Dr. Mortimer, who told him all the details about Henry Baskerville's arrival. Stapleton's first idea was that this young man from Canada might be killed in London before he ever came to Devonshire. He no longer trusted his wife after she had refused to help him trap the old baronet, and he did not dare to leave her alone for long because he feared losing his control over her. For this reason, he took her with him to London. They stayed at the Mexborough Private Hotel in Craven Street, which, as I later discovered, was one of the hotels my agent had visited while searching for evidence. There he kept his wife locked in her room, while he, wearing a false beard, followed Dr. Mortimer to Baker Street and later to the station and the Northumberland Hotel. His wife suspected something of his plans, but she was so afraid of him because of his violent treatment that she did not dare to write a warning to the man she knew was in danger. If Stapleton had found such a letter, her life would not have been safe. In the end, as we know, she cut words out of a newspaper to form her message and addressed the letter in disguised handwriting. It reached the baronet and gave him his first warning of danger. It was very important for Stapleton to obtain some article of Sir Henry's clothing so that, if he needed to use the dog, he would always have something to give it his scent. With his usual speed and boldness, he acted at once, and there is little doubt that the hotel servant was bribed to assist him. By chance, however, the first boot he obtained was new and therefore useless for his purpose. He returned it and obtained another one, an important detail because it proved to me that we were dealing with a real hound. No other explanation could account for his desire for an old boot and his lack of interest in a new one. The more strange and unusual an event appears, the more carefully it should be examined. Often, the very detail that seems to confuse a case is, when studied calmly and logically, the one that explains it. Then our friends visited us the next morning, and all the time they were followed by Stapleton in a cab. From the way he knew about our rooms and my appearance, and from his general behavior, I believe that his criminal career was not limited to the Baskerville case alone. It is interesting that during the last 3 years there have been 4 serious burglaries in the West Country, and in none of them was anyone arrested. The last one, at Folkestone Court in May, was especially shocking, because the burglar shot a page who surprised him. I cannot doubt that Stapleton supported himself in this way, and that for years he had been a desperate and dangerous man. We saw an example of his quick thinking that morning, when he escaped from us so cleverly, and also of his boldness when he sent my own name back to me through the cabman. From that moment, he knew that I had taken control of the case in London, and that he had no chance of success there. So he returned to Dartmoor and waited for the baronet to arrive. "One moment," I said. "You have described the events clearly, but there is one point you have not explained. What happened to the Hound while its master was in London?" "I have thought about that, and it is indeed important. There is no doubt that Stapleton had someone who helped him, though he probably did not share all his plans with him. There was an old servant at Merripit House named Anthony. His connection with the Stapletons goes back several years, even to the time when Stapleton was a schoolmaster, so he must have known that his master and mistress were actually husband and wife. This man has disappeared and left the country. It is interesting that Anthony is not a common name in England, while Antonio is common in Spanish or Spanish-American countries. The man, like Mrs. Stapleton, spoke good English, but with a slight accent. I have seen this old man cross the Grimpen Mire, using the path that Stapleton had marked. So it is very likely that while Stapleton was away, this man took care of the Hound, though he may not have known the true purpose for which it was kept. The Stapletons then returned to Devonshire, and soon afterwards Sir Henry and you followed them. Now let me explain my own position at that time. You may remember that when I examined the paper on which the printed words had been pasted, I looked carefully for a watermark. While doing so, I held it close to my face and noticed a faint smell of the perfume called white jessamine. There are 75 different perfumes that a criminal expert must be able to recognize, and in my experience, cases have sometimes depended on identifying such a scent quickly. This perfume suggested that a woman had handled the paper, and my thoughts immediately turned toward the Stapletons. So even before we went to the West Country, I was certain about the Hound, and had already guessed who the criminal was. It was my plan to watch Stapleton. However, I could not do that if I stayed openly with you, because he would have been very cautious. So I deceived everyone, including you, and secretly traveled down while pretending to remain in London. My difficulties were not as great as you believed, though such small matters must never stand in the way of an investigation. I stayed mostly at Coombe Tracey, and used the hut on the moor only when it was necessary to be close to events. Cartwright came with me, and disguised as a country boy, he was very helpful. He brought me food and clean clothes. While I watched Stapleton, Cartwright often watched you, so I was able to control the whole situation. I have already told you that your reports reached me quickly, being sent on from Baker Street to Coombe Tracey. They were very useful to me, especially that truthful detail about Stapleton's past. I was able to confirm the identity of the man and the woman, and understood exactly where I stood. The case had become more complicated because of the escaped convict and his connection with the Barrymores. You also solved that matter very effectively, though I had already reached the same conclusion from my own observations. By the time you discovered me on the moor, I already understood the whole situation. But I did not have enough proof to present the case in court. Even Stapleton's attempt to kill Sir Henry that night, which ended instead in the death of the poor convict, did not give us strong enough evidence of murder. There seemed to be no choice but to catch him in the act, and for that we had to use Sir Henry, alone and apparently without protection, as bait. We did so, and although it caused our client a serious shock, we succeeded in proving our case and forcing Stapleton to his own destruction. I must admit that exposing Sir Henry to such danger is a weakness in my handling of the case. But we could not have predicted the terrible and shocking sight that the beast would present. Nor could we have foreseen the fog that allowed it to appear so suddenly. We achieved our goal at a cost which both the specialist and Dr. Mortimer assure me will only be temporary. A long journey may help our friend recover not only from his damaged nerves, but also from his hurt feelings. His love for the lady was deep and sincere. And for him, the saddest part of this dark affair was that he had been deceived by her. It only remains to explain the part that she played in all this. There is no doubt that Stapleton had a strong influence over her. It may have been love, or fear, or perhaps both, since those feelings can exist together. In any case, his control over her was complete. At his command, she agreed to pretend to be his sister, although he discovered the limits of his power when he tried to make her directly involved in murder. She was willing to warn Sir Henry as much as she could without clearly betraying her husband, and more than once she tried to do so. Stapleton himself seems to have been jealous, and when he saw the baronet showing interest in her, even though this was part of his own plan, he could not stop himself from reacting with sudden anger, which revealed the passionate nature hidden behind his calm behavior. By encouraging the relationship, he made sure that Sir Henry would often visit Merripit House and that, sooner or later, he would get the opportunity he wanted. On the critical day, however, his wife suddenly turned against him. She had learned about the death of the convict, and she knew that the Hound was being kept in the outbuilding on the evening when Sir Henry was coming to dinner. She accused her husband of planning a crime, and there was a violent argument, during which he showed her for the first time that she was no longer the only object of his interest. Her loyalty quickly changed to deep hatred, and he realized that she might betray him. So he tied her up to prevent her from warning Sir Henry. He probably hoped that when the countryside blamed the baronet's death on the family curse, as they surely would have done, he could persuade his wife to accept the situation and remain silent about what she knew. In this, I believe, he made a mistake. Even if we had not been there, his fate would likely have been sealed. A woman of Spanish blood does not easily forgive such treatment. And now, my dear Watson, without looking at my notes, I cannot give you a more detailed explanation of this strange case. I do not think that anything important remains unexplained. He could not hope to frighten Sir Henry to death as he had frightened the old uncle with his demon hound. The beast was savage and half-starved. Even if its appearance did not frighten its victim to death, it would at least paralyze any resistance. No doubt. There is only one difficulty left. If Stapleton had inherited the estate, how could he explain that he, the heir, had been living nearby under a different name? How could he claim the property without causing suspicion and investigation? That is a serious difficulty, and I fear you ask too much if you expect me to solve it completely. The past and the present are within my field of study, but predicting what a man might do in the future is far more difficult. Mrs. Stapleton told us that her husband had discussed this problem several times. There were 3 possible plans. He might claim the property from South America, prove his identity to the British authorities there, and obtain the fortune without ever coming to England. Or he might use a careful disguise during the short time he needed to stay in London. Or he might give an accomplice the documents and proofs, allow that person to claim the inheritance, and keep a share of the income for himself. From what we know of him, we cannot doubt that he would have found some solution. And now, my dear Watson, we have worked very hard for several weeks, and for one evening, I think we may turn our minds to something more pleasant. I have tickets for Les Huguenots. Have you heard the Durescas? If you would be ready in half an hour, we can stop at Marcini's for a small dinner on the way. The end.